the idea of this pre-day was to, share with you a little bit of some of the opportunities that the concept of EDR evasion may provide for you businesses, right? Who are you are on the technical side versus on the business side, or both? Technical, and most of you are technical, both. Okay, all right. I think so. You guys are running a business like I am running the business. My name is Ricardo Villadiego. By the way, I'm the founder and CEO of Lumu. I'll share the agenda in a second, but when you're running a business, you have to identify every opportunity to ensure that your business is scale, right? To ensure that your customers are seeing value from the services that you provide. That's what we do every day at Lumu, right? And that's what we empower MSPs to do when it comes to cybersecurity. So this is the topic. The agenda that we're gonna cover today. I'm gonna start talking about how do we get here? What's the current landscape from the threat point of view that take us to this point where EDR evasion is becoming such a big issue. And then my friend Chase here is gonna go deeper into EDR evasion, into what are the actual tactics and techniques that the bad guys are doing to be successful evading EDRs, regardless of the brand. It's not a problem of the brand; it's a problem of the technology itself. We do a quick break at 10 a.m. And then Javi, my chief product officer, he's gonna do a live demo on how EDRs are evaded, right? He's gonna do the demo, and then he's gonna go through the different tactics and the techniques that were used to enable him to effectively do the EDR evasion. And then Ben, our sales manager for the MSP business, is gonna join us to articulate what's the opportunity for the MSPs, both from the technical point of view, because at the end of the day, my heart is technical, right? I want to protect my customers. I want to make sure that my customers are not affected by an incident. But I also want to make sure that there is a business opportunity around this, and the opportunity of adding a layer that helps you articulate cybersecurity for them in a more effective way. Are we good with that? Awesome. And if you guys ask questions, we have swag for you. We have gift for you. So don't be shy. Let's not make this a monologue of me talking my ideas, but you please ask questions so that we make this more fun, right? So the evolution of cyber threats, and since you all said you have no idea of what Lumu is, I'm gonna give you a short intro of what Lumu is. This is the second company that I'm building in cybersecurity. So second-time founder. I'm Colombian, by the way. It's crazy that a Colombian is building cybersecurity businesses. But believe it or not, in Colombia, there were a lot of security problems, right? I guess you all know, but maybe you have seen some of the series in Netflix. So those problems, help you to create a mindset of awareness, right? I was telling to another MSP group that, I grew in one of the most dangerous, at the time, probably the most dangerous place in the world. There were something like 100 deaths every week. And there was a crazy guy, you probably know the last name, that said, I'm going to give you, at the time, 25, 30 years ago, $500 to anyone that kills a policeman. Crazy, huh? So, you go see a policeman, what do? You run away from that guy because you don't know what's going to happen, right? So that creates this sense of awareness that eventually will make it into cybersecurity, and eventually will make it into the business that we're building that is it's rooted into the concept that nothing good happens when you are in contact with an adversary. So if you see signs of adversarial activity in your network, you want to run away from that behavior. You don't want to see that behavior in your network, right? That's kind of what we have articulated into the cybersecurity business. So the simpler way to articulate what Lumu does is the fancy tools and big budgets won't keep you out of trouble, right? You can have the fancy tools that you want. And here are examples of some of the breaches that have happened in the last 5 years. All these guys, they had the tool that they wanted to have. Uber, Dell, Walgreens, Microsoft, the tool that they wanted to have, it was at their disposal, right? That tool didn't get them out of trouble. What can help them to be out of trouble is building a security practice. It's building a SecOps practice, is effectively operating cybersecurity. And in most of the cases, if you look at these breaches that happened, the adversary was in for a long period of time. In average, 3 to 6 months, the bad guy was in the network. Imagine someone goes into your house, right? Goes into the basement, and you don't realize that guy is there for 6 months. This is something that is unthinkable, right? But that's what happens in cybersecurity. A threat actor gets into the network, and it gets hidden between 3 to 6 months before it is detected. Why that happens? Well, it happens because of that concept of nothing good happens when you are in contact with adversary. If you identify that behavior, then you have the ability to eliminate that behavior in the network. So building a security operations practice helps you to be more resilient. Why? Because you are actively hunting for signs that the adversary, that the threat actor is in your network. There's something funny here is that all of these companies, they did a compromise assessment. Do you know when they did it? After the breach. After they get compromised, they all run to do a compromise assessment because they want to learn how it happened. This will never happen again until it happens again, and then they do another compromise assessment. And then the conclusion is, no, it happened again because it was a completely different tactic. It was a completely different technique, right? So that's something that Lumu changed or brought into the marketplace, the ability to continuously assess the compromise of your network. If you're continuously assessing the state of compromise in your network, then you had the better chance, you had the upper card to eliminate that behavior and essentially become more resilient. There's something to say here, and the value that security operations adds to the companies that we protect, and is that the cybersecurity stack, security operation is it empowers the security stack that you have to perform much better, right? I often said to the customers and partners that use Lumu in their day today that adding Lumu in their stack helps them to gain better outcomes from the security stack. So the best of breed security stack can provide a shitty outcome if it is poorly operated. You buy your best of breed EDR, your best of breed firewall, your best of breed email security tool, these guys, right? And they all got breached. So a shitty outcome, even though you had the best of the best. What was the common denominator? Poorly operated. But on the other side, you build strong security operations practice, then you had the ability to get a top-of-the-art outcome from a security stack that may not be as powerful. So a decent EDR, a decent firewall, a decent email security tool will provide you a better outcome if it is rightly operated. And what we do is we are an enabler of security operation for partners, for the MSPs that use our technology. We enable you, we empower you to operate cybersecurity at the top. And in a world where the necessity to operate cybersecurity is more relevant than ever, right? That's, a short view of what we do. And then Lumu we started a company in 2020. Company is headquartered here in Florida. We have operation across the US, in Latin America, and in Europe. 9,000 accounts use our technology today. We're protecting over 12,000 users that use our technology, but they protect about 3 million of endpoints that are their customers. Like I said, over 20 countries, 217 tech partnerships. The way that you can put together the stack in a single page to ensure that it provides a better outcome is that you have to natively integrate with these technologies. In 2025, guys, if there is a technology that you're trying to buy that is unable to integrate with another technology, don't buy that shit. In 2025, it's impossible that a technology is unable to integrate with another. And if that technology is unable to integrate, it's because mainly two reasons. Number one, they don't have API, so it's legacy. They are essentially putting another coat of paint on all technology. Or two, there is an executive decision of avoid integration because they are trying to lock you in. They don't want you to get options. So if question number one that you ask when you buy a cybersecurity technology, do you provide open API so that others integrate with you? If the answer is no, run away from that technology. That's not good for the future of the business. A ton of data that we analyze, a ton of threat adversarial content that we identify and blocked in real time. And even with less than 5 years in the market, vetted by the most influential analysts in the industry, GigaOM, EMA, Forrester, Frost & Sullivan, and so on and so forth. Any question here so far? All good? Awesome. So now let's get into how the battlefield is changing. There's something that amazed me of this market. We have in my CPO, we tend to joke that once you get into cybersecurity, you never get out of cybersecurity, right? And it is because it changes all the time. So the fact that we implement prevention capabilities, so a better way to identify the adversary or to win the battle to the adversary, doesn't tell to the adversary to open a freaking Uber account and start doing other stuff, right? They don't do that. Or Uber Eats account and start delivering food. They don't do that, right? What they do is they are building a business. They're running a business too. What they do is that they identify how they're going to overcome those new prevention mechanisms that were put in place. That's what happens. So that's why the battlefield is changing all the time. I think in 2025, we're probably facing one of the most dangerous environments out there. There's a ton of evolution in technology. AI, you all, I'm sure, very aware of that. We often tend to believe that AI is only gonna provide value to the good guys. Any tool is used for good and for bad. And then we who are on the good side of the equation start using that technology to provide better value. But the bad guys on the other side of the equation, they're going to use that technology to see how they become more effective at what they do too. So that is affecting significantly the threat landscape. And then the other fact that affects the threat landscape is the realization that the bad guys have now of the tool set that companies have, right? So they are all going with the assumption that there are some controls in place, and that they need to go around those controls. So those two things are driving significantly how the battlefield is changing. And what you're going to see in the next slides, it's coming out of a report that we produce every year that's called the Compromise Report. It's essentially analyzing all the data from those 9,000 customers that we are helping to be secure in their networks and in their businesses, and identifying what are the most trendy techniques that we see the bad guys using. Stay tuned for this report, because I think it's coming late this week, next week, early next week. Okay. Stay tuned for this one. This is right out of the oven. So number one is evasion, and we're gonna go deeper into how bad guys evade. In fact, we're gonna have later today a live demo of how threat actors evade EDR tools. That's the first one, bypassing controls. Again, they come in, they attack with the mindset that there are some controls in place that they have to evade, very differently than what they were doing 5 years ago, right? Particularly in this market as well. If you had a threat actor that's attacking Bank of America and the likes, they know that for a long time there were some controls in place. That wasn't the case in this market. That wasn't the case when we're protecting small businesses. Small businesses have rapidly adopted technology because they're facing the same threats that large companies are facing now. However, the defense ecosystem that was put in place in this market wasn't comparable with the defense mechanisms that were put in place in large businesses. Malware, so they're essentially using the same techniques that they're using now to attack large businesses to attack small businesses. This is something that is happening in the enterprise market for a long period of time now. And they're just taking advantage of the lack of adoption of technology to replicate, to get access to a bigger market. And the way they have now to monetize the attacks, they didn't pay attention to small businesses before because it's harder to monetize the attacks on small businesses. But they now have a way to monetize the attacks on small businesses. That's why the threat is coming this way. So bypassing, malware is becoming smarter, invisible, essentially. Invisible to the controls that you had in place, so it becomes harder to detect. Right? You have whatever EDR that you want to have, you have whatever email security preventions that you have in place. It's just harder for those tools to detect. And when the threat actor bypass those controls, where do they land? Right? They land in the network of the companies that we're protecting. And the behavior that they do on the network, that's something that they can't hide, right? That's why the network becomes such relevant, such an advantage point to identify bad behavior for the companies that we protect. Phishing is becoming super sophisticated. That idea of the Nigeria prince that was giving away his fortune, I see people smiling because they probably live through that stage. That doesn't happen anymore, right? LLM is providing capabilities to the bad guys to evolve their phishing attacks at speed. And the gift cards, yeah. I don't know, how many of you think that your email security tools are providing value? They're providing value? How much value?
To the users and how well
they're trained.
Well, because they train the system in turn, and in some cases I've seen it work very, very well, and in some cases I've seen it not work because the user relying on the system.
I think bad guys have the ability essentially to create a new phishing attack for every campaign. That wasn't the case 3-4 years ago. There was a campaign that was widely used, but now every new attack It's a new email with a fresh email account. In some cases, with a compromised email account from the same company that they are attacking. So it's just freaking interesting how the market is evolving. So another example that prevention is failing. Prevention alone is failing. And some of these brands are familiar to you because they're active in this market. SolarWinds, prevention tools essentially allow to the deployment of trusted software, right? And that's how they got into that network. And once the threat actor gets into the network, it stays in the network until, unfortunately, bad news are already, the breach is already in the news. That's mainly what's happening. And SolarWinds was knew about the attack when the FBI contacted them, months after the incident. Kaseya, a brand that's well known in this space, the attacker were able to push ransomware using their RMM tools, right? So again, trusted. There's the trusted element. I don't review the RMM because the RMM is a valid tool. Then I weaponize the RMM to deploy bad artifacts. MGM resorts, no malware use. Human element. We okay here? Oh, wow. The human element, right? The EDR, of course. If you get some level of trust within the networks, within the cybersecurity stack, the whole stack, it's like trust is, it's replicated for the elements of the stack. So if a human, click on something, then we assume that human has the right to click and to execute whatever they were executing and provide the bad outcome, right? So that was MGM. Change Healthcare, very recent. Essentially, a Black Hat Alpha, the Alpha group used stolen credentials. The increasingly use of stolen credentials to get into compromised network is incredible. When there is this saying that if you have stolen credentials, you don't need to hack, you just need to log in, right? And that's kind of the trend that's happening in the market. This quote I think says it all, right? This is CISO. No EDR, no one is able to cut all living off the land attacks. And that's one of the techniques that is most widely used today is to get into company. What's living off the land is the playground that this device has already. So the tools that this device has already, we assume those tools are trusted. So the bad guy just weaponizes those tools. EDR knows that tool is there, and bad behavior won't be detected. CISO is Lumu is one of the tools that CISO recommends to increase the resilience to the cyber resilience to ransomware attacks. Now, let's get into the topic of EDR evasion, just at the surface, because we're going to go deeper into that. What do you think is the first limitation of the EDR? What is the first limitation of the EDR? Making sure that it's installed. Any other? How it's set up.
That it cannot be installed on.
Things that I cannot be installed on, right? The first limitation is that we assume all devices we need to protect, we have the ability to deploy an EDR. And that's fundamentally false, right? There are many devices in which I cannot install an agent. Yet, devices that I need to protect or devices that can provide the entryway to a bad guy to do stuff in my network, right? That's the first one. Then, you can complement that with, shadow IT. Devices I cannot deploy in an agent because I just don't know exists in my network, right? Users using corporate credentials on their personal devices. devices that are not managed by the MSP, but yet they use corporate credentials on those devices. That freaking device get compromised with info stealer, credentials go out to the dark web, bad guy comes back, logging in, not hacking in, right? Most EDRs, if not all, are blind to network traffic. So the EDR, and you're gonna see more in depth with Javi. They see bad behavior in the laptop, in the device, right? If you look at the cyber kill chain, there are different stages. Bad behavior means exploitation, escalation of privilege, right? You're halfway into the cyber kill chain. Your opportunity to stop the bad behavior could have done way before. Seeing the network gives you the ability to mitigate that threat with early signs of that threat happening in your environment. So that's the first limitation. The first limitation has to do with you don't have the complete visibility of your environment with the EDR mindset. Now, the other thing that is truly interesting is what happens when the EDR is evaded. All right, and this is something that I want you to take in from this session. When the EDR is evaded, so is your XDR. Why? Because your XDR is taking telemetry from the EDR. And if the EDR didn't saw it happening, the SDR won't be able to see it, right? And so is your MDR. Why? Because your MDR is getting that telemetry from the EDR too, and or the XDR. So the MDR won't have an alert specifically coming from the EDR. Now, there are MDRs that have other coverage. And the question that you have to ask to the MDR is, how do you cover when the EDR is bypassed? Are you ingesting network telemetry? Are you deploying other capabilities to identify that the EDR has been evaded? In some cases they do, and then that's a valid answer. But generically speaking, when the EDR gets bypassed, so is your XDR and your MDR. So you have to ask those questions when you are researching for a vendor to provide a better outcome for your customers. Or if you're building those capabilities in-house, which is something that we encourage every MSP to do. The cybersecurity business is a huge business that is growing, that if you don't build those capabilities within your MSPs, you're essentially neglecting the opportunity that you have to keep scaling your business. The problem is that it has been traditionally hard to build those capabilities. What Lumu is doing is facilitating, is reducing the complexity for an MSP or an MSSP to deliver state-of-the-art outcomes when it comes to security operation. Is this clear here? Is there any concern? All good? Make sense? Awesome. Now let's turn into the topic of malware. Malware is becoming smarter, more granular, more modular. So those days where there was use of, a complete file that was the bad artifact are long gone. That's why AV isn't effective anymore. Like if you had an AV in your environment, the chances that it detects something today, are really, really low, right? EDRs have the benefit that they identify behaviors and so on and so forth. But as we're gonna see, when you bypass the EDR, then they're not able to see those behaviors. It's more modular. It reminds me of those crazy videos. Imagine Chase, remember that bad guys in the Middle East when the 3D printers were created. They were printing guns, just the pieces of the guns, right? So there was no gun. There were the pieces of a gun that you could put that through a scanner, and the scanner won't see a gun, so everything is good. But then you put those pieces together, and boom, you have a gun, right? It's the same happening today with malware. You see elements coming through the network, you see elements coming through the desktop that are no malicious. But when you put them together, boom, you have a solid platform of evil, right? You have Luma Stealer, you have Catbot, you have all these elements that help you to cause harm really in a very scalable way. That's what you see. So it's hard to scrutinize each one of the elements that landed on the laptop. It's easier to scrutinize where the laptop is getting those elements, because those elements are not coming out of thin air. They're coming from some infrastructure, right? You have to connect to some infrastructure to download those elements. That is network traffic. If you identify the network traffic and you identify that a laptop is contacting adversarial infrastructure that is hosting all these elements, that by itself you cannot tell it's something bad happening, but you know that infrastructure is serving crimeware, you don't want your devices. There's no reason whatsoever why any of the devices that you're protecting is contacting that adversarial infrastructure. There's no business justification for that. You eliminate that behavior, you eliminate everything that comes from that behavior. This is a simple way of the granularity of an info stealer, right? You have the first company that I built was on anti-fraud, and an anti-fraud, their malware technologies that were designed to steal credentials from the consumer. Back in 2013, 2012, at the point I saw, that is going to come into the enterprise market too. There's no reason why stealing a credential from a consumer is different from stealing a credential from an employee, right? They're essentially using all those tactics to steal credentials from employees nowadays, and it works exactly like it was working when bad guys were stealing credentials from clients of Bank of America or Citibank. There's a phishing involved, right? There's a user that has to do click. There's your initial access, and then that initial access, and then here comes the granularity of these pieces of malware, right? That initial access start building covert channels where they can get, command and control instructions, and as well as covert channels where they can deploy and exfiltrate data. Multiple capabilities to do so. This, InfoStealer is truly a disease, right? The amount of devices that are compromised with InfoStealer is increasingly high, is insanely high. That's why Microsoft and the FBI and Europol put in place an operation to take down Luma. The Luma, infrastructure, the criminal infrastructure. However, we just detected the Luma is back up again, right? It's just the flexibility that this architecture gives to the criminal, right? They just can keep retaking the compromised device. Keep in mind, when the FBI takes down the infrastructure, what happened? They don't clean out the devices. The device continues to be infected. They just eliminate the infrastructure where the compromised device is connected with. But this granularity enables the crime bot operator to build new infrastructure where the compromised devices can go and connect again. That's why we see an increasing amount of new IOCs coming out for Luma InfoStealer. But before I go into that, there was an advisory that we put together last Friday for the MSP community and the market as a whole. This is the data that an InfoStealer grabs from every computer. It gets your auto fields. It runs at the browser level, essentially. So everything that you're saving at the browser level gets stolen, essentially. Your auto fields, your cookies. Why do you think they steal cookies? Stealing sessions, avoid MFA, circumvent MFA. So the amount of cookies that these guys have stolen is increasingly high. File grabbers, right? They can go and I want to see everything that's a PDF in this file, configuration files. It's increasingly high. And most EDRs are honestly, when the threat runs at the browser level, most EDRs are blind of what's happening in the browser, right? It's unfortunate, but it's the truth. Now we put this advisory last Friday. All the new IOCs are coming out of our ability to track Luma. We're making them free and available for this community so that you can protect better your customers. There are about 5,000 new IOCs that were detected in the last 5 days. Phishing, old tactic, new trick. So phishing is as soul as it can be, right? It's you guys think that phishing is gonna go away anytime soon? It's just so effective, right? From the bad guy point of view, right? It's easy, it's cheap also, right? And it's a numbers game, right? They use blast, phishing, and if 0.1% falls into the attacks, that's still a business for them, right? So that's not gonna go away anytime soon. But what scares me is that it is becoming more sophisticated. Right. That's what I asked that question. If you guys see that the email prevention tools are providing value, I think they provide value for everything that's known, definitely to automate the process. But for fresh new phishing attacks, we are seeing those fresh new phishing attacks going straight into the inbox of the employees. So training the employees becomes. I'm no believer. I know this guy's not a believer, but it sounds like, with phishing attacks getting into the inboxes at the speed that they're getting, probably, we need to invest into how to train better the user, right? And then all those phishing, at least the data that we have, 74.6% of those phishing attacks, they all were variations using AI of previous campaigns. And the other thing that we saw is about 57% of the phishing attacks came from a compromised account. That is really scary, right? If you are within a company, your secretary or your assistant gets compromised and it's her email who's sending phishing to the rest of the company.
That a lot in education, where it won't necessarily be from your company, but it'll be from another education.
It's insanely crazy what's happening, right? In tile companies happens too, that same behavior, right? It's one of the members of the ecosystem gets compromised, and that member of the ecosystem start blasting phishing. It's coming from the valid domain. So there's no way that the email prevention tool would trigger that as an alert. It's a valid email. There's no spoofing an email on that, right? It's the right content also.
The other thing that I've seen a lot lately is they're using secure message capabilities, which that is a legitimate email, but it's that one step removed that guides the phishing.
It gives you more credibility, right? It's secure, right? So modern phishing methods that we're not going to see going away anytime soon, MFA fatigue attacks, they're essentially spoofing the MFA system until the end user clicks yes out of fatigue, essentially. Quishing, QRQ phishing is increasing a lot, and it's increasing because now there's no URL that the email prevention tool have to take. It's more complex for the email prevention tool they have to essentially round the QR code, find the URL. They're just more steps. It makes the whole simple more complex. Fake captchas, PowerShell downloads, that's just increasing at scale. So in summary, and just getting here to the end of my time, the new and improved attackers toolbox for 2025 and beyond involves evasion. Number one, the bad guy comes to affect your business and the businesses that you protect with the mindset that there are controls in place that they have to evade. So you need to make sure that you have the ability to identify when a threat actor is attempting to do so, is attempting to evade the stack that you have. Because if you don't have that ability, then bad things may happen, right? Malware is becoming fileless, right? There's no a file per se, like I was explaining, that is a malware. There are multiple elements that when they're combined becomes a malware. Obfuscation in the malware, crimeware ecosystem is growing rapidly, so it's becoming more hard to detect. Phishing, quishing, and MFA fatigue and LLMs involved into the creation of phishing is something that will continue to evolve. There's a lot of things that I think we should research into how to protect the end user, how to change the behavior of the end user so the end user becomes another member of the blue team in the companies that we protect, another line of defense. Why this matter for this community? Well, it matters because the mindset of prevention is not necessarily true anymore. Yes, we need the prevention capabilities, but as we do that, we also need the visibility capabilities. There's no way to defend what we can't see, right? We have to see what's happening. And the network gives you an advantage point to see what's happening in the environments that you're protecting. So threats are becoming stealthier, faster, harder to attribute, and customer relies on MSPs for protection at the end of the day. So there is an opportunity on that. It's an opportunity to educate the market into this new threat landscape, but there is also a business opportunity that you as members of this community have to elevate the cyber resilience of the businesses that you protect, and we hope that we can help in this journey, you all. There's one thing that I said, and what's coming next is we're doubling down into the concept of EDR evasion. EDRs get bypassed, networks done, right? It's easier to bypass the EDR, but for the threat actor, it's almost impossible to hide the tracks that he leaves in the network. Yes, he can try to host command and control infrastructure on AWS. He can use command and CNC infrastructure on cloud tools like OneDrive, like Google Drive. But the traces of that happened at the network level, so you have the ability to see. Lumu eliminates the blind spot, as you're going to see in this process. And last call to action here, stay tuned for late this week, the beginning of next week, for the 2025 compromise report. We will make sure that you all get a copy of that. But if not, make sure that you register to the Lumu blog so you get a copy as well. For the new assets that we continue to provide to help the community prevention. And with that, I'm going to leave you with my friend Chase Cunningham, who's going to cover EDR evasion in action.
So Ricardo didn't give it, but I'll give you the statistics because I just actually got off a call the other day with some folks at DHS. Since ChatGPT came online, thank you, OpenAI, phishing is up. Statistically speaking, phishing is up 4,000%. Yeah, right. So it's like, thank you. That's awesome. We appreciate that you basically gave everyone a nuclear weapon, and then now we get to take more phishing training because we love that stuff. So yeah, my name is Chase Cunningham. It's Dr. Cunningham if you want to be formal, because it makes my mom proud and your tax dollars paid for it anyway. I'm a retired Navy chief, so I was a cryptologist my whole career. Worked at NSA after that. What's that?
Condolences.
Yeah. I was Navy at least, so the awesome level is high. No Air Force or Army in my house. Although I do have a kid who wants to join the Coast Guard, and I'm like trying to talk him out of that, because if you can swim home from a deployment, it's not a deployment. So we're going to talk about EDR evasion and security tool failures. I'm actually working with the great folks at Lumu here. We're generating an ebook on this content, so you guys will be able to get that pretty soon. And we've gone way down the rabbit hole on this thing. If you want this content, please let me know. I'm glad to share it with you. Like every other, technology geek in the space, I have a podcast. It's called Dr. Zero Trust. It's no vendor sponsorship, no BS. Check it out, look it up. There's no sell. It's literally just me ranting about how jacked up the technology space is. So if you want this stuff, please let me know. I'm glad to provide you data, slides, all that thing. All right, so let's be real about EDR. I think CrowdStrike has got a hit squad out for me because I continually beat them up. I mean, they only brick the internet. So EDR can be evaded, like anything that anyone builds. And this is not specific to actually cybersecurity, but any technology that anyone builds, by the very nature of engineering, someone else can reverse engineer it and break it. Tools are just tools. I can use a shovel to dig an irrigation ditch to grow crops to feed a family, or I could bash someone's skull in with it. Just depends on the motivation of the individual using said tool. EDR, by its very nature, because of engineering, is not inherently secure. Vendors will tell you that we stop breaches. I love it when I see that, because if you stop breaches, then we wouldn't have breaches. But yeah, we continue to engage in this back and forth. The reality of the space is, with the democratization of technology, automation, AI, even though none of this is AI, it's actually applied machine learning. And there's another argument we could have any other time. Yeah, it's sprinkling AI marketing on ML, but cool. I mean, we're never going to be beating the bad guy. This is, like Ricardo was saying, this is a business. It's a really good business, actually. The main guy, Gustafer, that runs one of the groups, his Lambo actually has a license plate on it that in Russian translates to thief, and he drives it around Red Square. So, I mean, it's good business. If you're looking to retire, you might open up your own hacking group. Core EDR is great because the deeper that you get into these pieces of software, the closer you get to silicon. As you get closer to silicon, you become God level. Everybody talks about admin privileges. Admin privileges are cute. When you can get all the way down to kernel, you can basically do whatever you want, plus admin, and do all those cool things, and there's nothing they can do about it. And software is software. It does what it's told, be it AI powered, be it ML powered, be it whatever. These are not autonomous, intelligent systems yet, anyway. They do what they're told. And if you can tell it to do the right things, it will get you. Actually, like I said, I just recently posted a YouTube video where a friend of mine figured out how to basically get GitLab Duo. Is anybody using GitLab Duo? To compromise people that were writing software, because it's an AI agent. Well, you tell the AI agent the right things and it coughs back the response. We'll talk about APTs. I would argue that I think nowadays the days of kind of just a general hacker weirdo living in his mom's basement, not showering and drinking too much Monster is pretty much over. Everyone anywhere can be an APT. You may not be government level APT, may not be able to operate 24/7 and take down national infrastructure. But I mean, Vault 7 leaked everything that we had at NSA to a degree. Those are all nation state level targets, tactics, and procedures. So they're out there. And then lastly, we'll talk about some defensive stuff. We're going to talk about across platforms too, because how many people in here that run an MSP have the folks that go, well, I have a Mac. No one hacks Macs. Yeah, right. I love it. It's like, well, yeah, then go play in traffic because no one will run you over. So cat and mouse game. Attackers are drawn to security systems really because it's a challenge. Many times when you see this, any red teamers in here, former red teamers, reformed red teamers, when you see something that's difficult, the first thing you think is, well, how could I break that? And you start figuring out a way around it. I mean, this is, again, back to the nature of technology. The harder it is to break it, the more you're going to work to try and break it just so that you can show off in a Discord channel and say, look what I did. And this begins the leak process. But nowadays, I don't even have to necessarily do much of the research or reverse engineering. I can go to Perplexity and ask Perplexity to help me figure out how to do that stuff. Adaptive defenses, security measures evolve constantly, but so do attackers. Like I said, ChatGPT comes out, phishing goes up 4,000%. I mean, this is just literally the nature of how humans operate. We see stuff, we figure out good ways to use it, good or bad or otherwise. I mean, we figured out splitting the atom generated electricity. Next thing we did, we blew up Japan. This is just how we operate. We find ways to use technology to do things that is probably not intended for. And endpoint protection, where's the first thing that your bad guys are going to run into for the people in your enterprise? It's going to be their EDR somehow, some way, some shape or form. They're going to be on this box out on the internet. That's where you're going to encounter them. Strategic foresight, you got to think like attackers. I honestly think we should just, at a large level, I think we should flat out abandon the idea of perfect defense, assume compromise, zero trust, those types of things. You're compromised. Until you prove otherwise, you're compromised. Like he was saying, some dude living in my basement. And then I want to make sure that I'm not compromised again and I keep going. This is a marathon. It has to continue. This is why SIM exists. This is why these types of solutions exist. If we don't do that, we're basically setting ourselves up for failure. Okay, EDR evasion. We're getting into some little bit technical stuff here, so I apologize. I'll try not to geek this out too much, but like I said, I'm glad to share other stuff to break this down for you folks if you need it to. So hooking evasion. APIs are awesome. APIs make all kinds of super cool things super cool, but APIs also are not intelligent and they'll do what you tell them to do because you can use those APIs specifically for that purpose. That's why APIs were created, to allow this thing to talk to that thing so that you could push and pull and do cool stuff. Guess what? That works really well when you can trick the API into doing stuff that it wasn't intended for. DLLs. Bypass EDRs. If DLLs are doing what they're doing inside of stuff in line with API hooking, you are pushing and pulling all kinds of information, and you're doing it at a level where the EDR doesn't even bother looking. It just says, okay, authenticated, okay, DLL from inside the system, okay, API to somewhere that I know that it's supposed to go. Sure, why not? Pass that information. Info stealer, do your thing. Direct and indirect syscalls, standard API. Advanced malware issues syscalls or jumps into legit memory locations. This is actually a pretty old technique. Like, we were doing this a long time ago. We used to call them no-op sleds and stuff like this, because if you can shove stuff into the right space inside of memory, it will just hide inside of the noise. The machine, the computer, the silicon, the operating system, all that stuff doesn't really pay that much attention. These are machines. They just do what they're told. If you can get it into a space where it's just a bunch of zeros inside of that syscall and inside of everything else, it's not going to detect it. These are native to the operating system. These are native to the application. They're not malicious in nature. You're using the system against itself. AMSI and ETW bypass, AMSI scan buffer, and the other one there, runtime. Runtime stuff is interesting because usually you're able to slide it by because it's happening at runtime. Most of the time, a lot of these EDR systems, a lot of these antivirus systems are looking for stuff to occur kind of as things spin up and get to where they're supposed to go. And we have it's almost like a diesel motor heating up. Once that diesel motor is heated up, okay, cool. We can see what's going on more. There's going to be more blips, more anomalies, etc. If we're doing it at runtime, a lot of stuff happens at runtime. If I'm going to slide something through, I want to do it when a lot of things are happening. Classic injection, signed by vulnerable drivers to gain kernel access and disable security controls. This is AWKIL. We used to have one. They didn't even bother really. They were kind of lazy with this when they started using this. This was the Russians that did this first. We used to call it AV kill. Now they just move the AV and put a U in there, and it's AWKIL, and it's new and cool. But it's the same stuff that we've been doing for a long time. You load the good stuff, you take your bad stuff, you load it into the good stuff. It's a signed driver, gets down to the kernel, and then you're doing stuff way, way deep in the system, and you're getting away with it because it's signed, right? Certificates and those types of issues. Certificates are great, but if you can manipulate a certificate, if you can manipulate a kernel, if you can manipulate anything that is signed, you now are authenticated and authorized on the system. And if it's in there, the EDR is not going to do anything about it. It's just going to let it do what it's supposed to do because it's signed. Not hard to get it in there either. Advanced techniques, pool injection. I think it's kind of funny that in the hacker forums, they actually call it a pool party. It's probably the worst pool party you've ever been to. But avoid typical detection paths and leverage trusted system mechanics because they're doing stuff inside of a pool, cloud, those types of things, dynamic controls, systems that spin up and spin down and burst. They do a lot of pooling. They do a lot of pooling of resources. If you're able to slide into that, you will go right by those particular controls. And staying in memory, if you can stay in memory correctly, encrypted and otherwise, you are able to do things again on the system where no one's paying attention. If you notice, there's a common trend in all these EDR evasion techniques. Typically what you're doing is you're using the function of the operating system or the application against itself, and you're operating with things that are foundational to the successful operation of the system because no one cares or looks at it. If it's not anomalous in nature, if it's not coming from somewhere that it shouldn't be coming from, in theory, it will allow you to do what you need to do. As long as you can get to that level, great. And again, admin privileges are awesome, but if you can get kernel, you just became God level mode on that system. Bring your own vulnerable driver attacks. Has anyone ever heard of BYOVD, right? BYOD, bring your own device, but this is bring your own vulnerable driver. Process hallowing, doppelganging, and reflective DLL. You're talking back to the system on its own. So DLLs do what DLLs do, but if you're able to do this, they call it doppelganging, is kind of the hacker terminology that you'll see people talk about. They're basically allowing the DLL to do things inside of legitimate processes. Again, you notice that trend where we're taking something that is malicious, inserting it into a known good process or a known good piece of an application, and then making it work backwards against itself. Callback tampering, kernel mode rootkits. These are a big one for folks in Russia, Ukraine, those types. There's a whole lot of different names in here. I won't go through all of them because they're kind of hard to say, but basically you're able to slide by because of the fact that it is, again, it's actually patching itself. This is one where the adversary does something he was talking about earlier, where compromise happens, you catch the compromise, and if they've architected it correctly, they will actually patch their compromise with a malicious patch so that they're inside of the system because they patch their own stuff. It's pretty brilliant when you think about it, but they're basically letting you think you found the hack, then they're offering the patch, and the patch is automated, and then they're working through the automated patch to continue the compromise. EDR defense limits, they can be bypassed if people can disable protections from kernel. If you can get to kernel, you are God mode on a system. Now, that's really probably not that big of a problem if one person's machine gets compromised. It sucks for whoever that is, and you can deal with it, but it is a problem. The truth of the matter, though, is a lot of these things, what do you notice is that they're operating very deep in the operating system, and they're operating with levels of privileges that are extremely escalated. If I can get to one machine, what's behind one machine? Domain, right? If I can get to domain, what's behind domain? Everything. And then I become the problem. So again, you could deal with one machine having an infection. You could deal with one machine having some of this stuff go wrong. But the goal of the adversary is to live off the land, which is what they talk about, and move and stay. They'll let this stuff run for months on end, even if it doesn't successfully operate on more than one machine. If I can get one and just let it keep sitting there in the noise and no one pays attention, eventually I activate and I go deeper and I do the things and get domain creds and go forward from there. Linux gets hacked too. Malware, Mac OS, those get hacked too. I personally like Linux, but I just don't use it that much. But I mean, Linux gets hacked very, very easily. What do Linux systems do typically that would cause a giant problem if they got compromised? Most servers are what? Right? Lots of Linux stuff out there that makes actual systems operate. If you can get Linux, you can get a lot of control. You can get deeper into systems. You can cause application level problems, etc. The other problem with Linux is they like to share libraries. People give Windows lots of crap about how much sort of sharing and you got seats up here, man, if you want one of these. Or unless you guys just, oh, never mind. I didn't even see there was a chair there. So he didn't shower this morning, so I'm just saying. But the whole thing is they like to share stuff. Symbiote rootkits, they call them symbiote in Linux because once they're in there, kind of like the Venom, if you saw those weird Tom Hardy movies, right, if they're in there, they like to move back and forth and just ooze themselves between systems. It is symbiotic in nature. But one of my favorite things I used to do when I was red teaming was there was a Linux injection where you could basically ask it to send you the hashes for the administrator on the system. And if you asked it the right thing, it would send you not only the hash for the administrator on that particular one, but it would go, well, would you also like to know about the hashes for everybody else that's tied to this? Well, yes, I would. And Linux is great because it just goes, okay, well, you gave me the correct command, so here, have those things. And then you're off to the races. Mac OS, Macs get hacked all the time too. The only reason that Macs are not as prevalent and compromised as Windows is because they're just not as prolific. I mean, that's really the nature of it. Majority of stuff that you see on Macs is Objective-C, which when you really think about that programming language, it's a pretty old programming language. Like for that to be functional and operational, doing things on a brand new Mac, kind of crazy. AppleScript is also what we would call in Windows PowerShell. Basically, Apple has to have its cool proprietary name for it, but it's Apple PowerShell. They just call it AppleScript because that sounds sexier. And I think we're going to do PowerShell stuff later, right? Yeah. You want to stop 90-something% of malware or ransomware? I'll tell you right now how to do it. Turn off PowerShell. There you go. Problem solved. I just saved you guys a bunch of money and you look awesome to your customers. And if you turn it off and then people come asking about it, if they don't have a valid reason for PowerShell, kick them out of your office. Like I've done this workshop with people that are CEOs at companies. They say, well, I need PowerShell. Are you doing development? No. Well, I need PowerShell. Why? Well, because I'm the executive. Okay, cool. You smell nice and make a lot of money. I don't care. Get out. Right. Mac-O, reflection to inject code. Macs don't do a good job, or excuse me, Mach-O. They don't necessarily do a good job of keeping a lot of this information. Windows does a better job of logs. Logs are great when you're doing this stuff. Mac's logs, if you've ever gone through those and done analysis on Mac logs, it's not a different language, but it's kind of like hieroglyphics when you've been drinking. It's not quite the same. So it gets a little bit complicated there. And then living off the land, I mean, this is where things go from bad to worse, is the goal of adversaries in this space, especially now with the fact that this is a business level operation. You've got everybody with nation state level capabilities. And unless they're just trying to cause problem or havoc, kind of what you were talking about with school systems, their goal is to live off the land, to stay as long as they possibly can, either for the purposes of reselling that information or to continue to go after other stuff that's deeper into the system. It's no good to get there once unless you just want to go, cool, I hacked whatever. But the truth of the matter is, in a business context, the longer I stay there, the more valuable that system is. And to your point about school systems, I actually just got back from Dallas, was working with some folks down there, because they were a great example of a system where they lived off the land for quite a while. Compromise occurred. I believe it was Tarrant County ISD got hit first. Tarrant County said, okay, we fixed it, although they didn't totally fix it because they had lots and lots of endpoints, lots and lots of connections. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it went Tarrant County, then it went Dallas County, and then it went to the next county over. And I mean, it's just this spread of compromise. Here, there's seats up here. I'll move my bag if you want. I promise I've bathed at least once this week. Or not. All right, cool. So yeah, living off the land. I mean, if you're able to get there, the goal is to get deep. Admin privileges, cool. Silicon level, even better. Honestly, if you can find Linux and you're doing red teaming, Linux is your friend, because Linux typically doesn't have anything installed on it. I mean, how many folks in here know what the typical antivirus system is for Linux?
Well, you run
Yeah, exactly. Turning it off, unplugging it. I mean, there's really not one. Mac OS. What sort of EDR are we running on Mac OS now? Okay, ThreatLocker, CrowdStrike, SentinelOne. Okay, so they're starting to have some of those out there. Okay. You use Windows Defender on Mac? Doesn't? Yeah. That's somewhere there's like a combat system in hell that's freaking out with that one.
It's not called Defenders for Windows anymore. It's Microsoft Defender.
Microsoft Defender that runs on Apple.
Yes.
All right. Steve Jobs is like rolling over in his grave.
That's how they power all the AI data centers. They hook them up to a generator and he rolls over.
So the tools that the adversaries use, Cobalt Strike. How many people in here are familiar with Cobalt Strike? Cobalt Strike's awesome. When I was on the national red team back in the day, we were all using Cobalt Strike to do red team operations, CCDC and whatever else. And the funny thing was, we were having conversations at those events like, man, I really hope no bad guy ever gets a hold of this. And sure enough, what happened? It leaked out. Cobalt Strike is awesome, but Cobalt Strike's awesomeness does not apply only to the good guys. And it was written by an Air Force dude, super great guy, just trying to do the right thing, happens to get stuff leaked out on the underground, and then it becomes the kind of, adversarial share that they use for a whole bunch of stuff. All-kill, custom rootkits, and state grade stuff. Like I said, Vault 7 was essentially I would call it the equivalent of tactical grade uranium being leaked on the front porch of every person on the planet, and folks going, please don't use this. I mean, it really, that's what it was. Like, those were NSA tools that were used for all kinds of different operations that we got leaked out because of whatever reason, and now they're available for anyone anywhere to use. We did have a bit of a gap of control of, there was a kind of a time horizon to get familiar with how to use those tools. We've passed it now, and thanks to these AI systems, anyone anywhere can figure out how to use that stuff. Everybody that can use a computer nowadays could potentially operate like an APT. I mean, that's just basically the truth of the matter. Again, they might not have the scale, they might not have the capacity, and they might not be able to go after some of the things that they probably would like to go after, but anyone, anywhere, grandma could be an APT operator if she knows how to ask the right questions. The best ones, Lazarus, APT 29, Fin 7, which is the big one that's doing finance stuff. Kernel is really what they do most of the time, in-memory loaders and identity abuse. Most of those folks too share tools. Like, they don't create this stuff in a vacuum. It is a competitive business model, but they do share stuff as far as if they find something that works, they'll resell it to someone else. So the money goes back and forth, the tools go back and forth. They are just as good at building and innovating on the evasion side of software as we are at building on the secure side of software. They're probably better because they don't have the same rules, regulations, and requirements that we do. No one's ever audited Fin 7. All-kill is probably one of the number one kernel EDR killers. If you see it on your system, it's basically burn the building down because it's there and bad things are already happening and they're already pretty deep inside of the network, so be very aware of that. AV neutralizer is actually easier to detect and find. It's not quite as, let's call it, full of finesse as all-kill, but it does hide in the system, and it is able to get pretty deep down into the kernel. So if you see those, and I believe the last time I saw when somebody ran one of those real files on, like, what's the system we all use, VirusTotal, it only picked up like maybe 10 out of the whole thing, so they slide right by. Script-based disabling, this is the one that you see the majority of people that are kind of not super skilled using. This is where they're doing stuff and basically running scripts to test it, and then it'll come back and say that this didn't work. It's just scripting all day long until you get the script to work right, and it's got a control infrastructure on the back end. But with the way that we can do vibe coding now, you pretty much could take that stuff, throw it into a vibe coding engine, and have it tell you what you've got wrong so that it will come back and give you the right script to run. The safe mode stuff is the stuff that they're deploying where it's actually getting really, really good at not kind of identifying who's behind it. You know, it used to be if you saw somebody doing something in a system and you saw that it was talking to Cyrillic language, this or whatever else, you kind of knew, you could make a pretty educated guess on where it was coming from. Now they're getting better at making sure that there's nothing that's going to show up in logs or inside of system calls or whatever else that's going to give away who's behind the attack. Authentication of bad guys in this space is suspect at best, but they're getting really, really good at hiding as well. Point of note, too, because I work with the government all the time, anytime you see a notification come out from the FBI, whoever, it says they took down an organization, they didn't take down anybody. They just inconvenienced them, and they'll be back up in 6-8 weeks on another particular piece of infrastructure. Even when we arrest one guy or gal, in one case, it's just one or two people. You're talking about entire entities and organizations. So, you know, Cisco doesn't go down if we arrest Chuck Brooks or whatever his name is, the guy running Cisco. There's a whole bunch of people there that keep it up and running. Mako loaders and reflective stuff is becoming one of the more active types of these EDR evasion techniques. It works really, really well. They're slightly more complicated. DLLs do weird things when you try and make them talk the way that they're trying to make them talk in these reflective attacks. But if you're able to do it correctly and get it passed through the system, you're in there and you're deep. You're way, way down into the application operating system, OS, and those types of things. And then living off the land, I think it's pretty comical, honestly, that in the forums they call it LOL bins because they're pretty much laughing at us. I mean, they're in there and they're saying that they're going to continue doing what they're doing and there's nothing we can do to stop it because they'll just keep pivoting to another system. The other problem that you have with this EDR evasion sort of approach is if I get caught on one system, if I actually knew what I was doing and I've done the operational time correctly, my EDR evasion tool will be on at least a few other systems so that when I do go down over here, I've got one to come back to over there. Honestly, if you ranked sort of EDR tools in the market, I think ThreatLocker is probably one of the best out there because it actually does the whole thing of what do you need to use? Is somebody using it? Everything else, we're just going to turn it off. Like that's why they don't typically have people get hit with ransomware because most people don't use PowerShell, so they just turn the crap off. Insiders are also one of your biggest areas of threat. Insiders are the human EDR evasion. We're all dealing with this more and more, depending on what region of the world you're in. It's getting even bigger. There was an article actually just published today that the former #2 admiral in charge of U.S. Navy computer systems was caught as an insider. So, I mean, it goes all the way up the food chain. Insiders are bad because they're in there and they're typically authenticated. Additionally, if you kind of think about what goes on with EDR, compromise, hacking, those types of things, the moment someone is compromised, they're essentially a malicious insider. I mean, it's not necessarily that they're doing something malicious or malevolent. You know, Ricky, the intern, doesn't know that he's doing anything bad. But if he's compromised and he's authenticated and he's got these things running on a system, he's an insider threat. Insider threat is way more risky than anything external. AT&T got hit pretty hard, and then EDR misses this stuff because it's not an anomaly. Unless they're really dumb and they start doing something that really sets off those types of systems that just give them away, like they're totally going and downloading terabytes of information to some Google Dropbox or God knows what else. If they're not morons, they can slide by and basically act as an EDR evasion tool or technique because they can get away with it. It's not even a policy violation. So again, you know, if you're able to get towards an insider and you can do things with that individual, that person, it makes things worse. A new tactic that you're seeing with a lot of these people that they're calling cyber exploitation is what the term I've seen, is where if I can't get you technically, I can get you via social means, using something, you know, bad that you've done on the internet or dirty stuff you're looking at or whatever else via your browser and whatever. Not that anyone ever looks at porn, but it is a thing, I guess. And then they'll get that person and they'll basically extort them and say, look, you need to put this piece of software inside of your infrastructure and I'll basically let you go. And then they install the EDR bypass on the system because they're being extorted and they're an authenticated user. So it gets really, really nasty really quick. And then they're able to do whatever they want with it. And the odds of you catching that are potentially exceptionally low.
That actually brings up a question. So I do a lot with higher education and we have a lot of esports. And all of the esports leagues say, well, you need to run this anti-cheat stuff, which is effectively a kernel level rootkit.
Ooh, super.
Which is real fun. So it's, you know, make sure that it's all isolated to these stations. But yeah, there's tons out there that they just give you, where it's like, hey, install this to give us that access.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's other things out there too that are legitimate apps that can also be misused in that.
That's very interesting. I hadn't considered the esports side of it, but I mean, that is a big deal, especially for some of these schools. I mean, there's schools now that have esports teams. My daughter's on an esports team, so hadn't even considered that, but that's a...
Now you're going to go check the computer, right?
No, it's our school system. I don't care. So, yeah. They made me pay private school money. I don't care if they get hacked. Yeah. If anything, I'll fix the breach and tell them they owe me, so... But I mean, yeah, so that's a good point, right? Is it may be a potentially authenticated, useful piece of software, but the downstream implications of that are significant as well. I have to do some looking into that. So the good thing about all this is that honestly, strategically speaking, we know what to do to counter the majority of these threats. Assume breach, right? Everything is compromised until proven otherwise, and then it's compromised again. And you make sure that it's, continually proven that it's not. And not just assume that it's threatened, assume that it's compromised, like it's hacked. Because if it's online and it's digital, someone's trying to get to it. I think the statistics have come out a few times over the years that from the time that you put a system online to the time that people start scanning it for compromise is like, I think it's under 9 minutes. So if it's online, it's compromised until proven otherwise, and then it's compromised again. Layered defense is essential. EDR and behavioral analytics, network monitoring, least privilege, patch management. So all those things that we have, they're there. Does anyone kind of not have some of those things? I think the majority of us, especially if we're running MSPs and MSSPs, we probably already have that stuff. How well does it work together is the real question. If you're looking at things in a vacuum, you're going to miss stuff. EDR evasion is going to slide by stuff like EDR. It's probably going to slide by stuff like behavioral analytics because it's doing things way, way deeper in the system and you're not going to catch strange behaviors. But in truth, you can't avoid the network. I mean, until Elon Musk puts chips in our brains, which doesn't seem like it's too far off, you eventually must touch the network. And if you're able to get enough information points, telemetry from different things within the infrastructure, you can correlate that and then make an educated guess about it. Patch management shouldn't be that difficult. If nothing else, at least as an MSP or service provider, have a reason to be able to tell that client why you didn't push a patch when you knew that there was a patch there. Let them make that decision. Don't be the one to not make it. At least privilege. The best way to enforce this, honestly, is just go into your system, run those policy builds, and then start turning stuff off. And if people start complaining, okay, you're hitting the sweet spot. Most of the time, people won't know what's gone away because they never used it in the first place. There's no reason for people in finance to have admin privileges on a machine. There's no reason for people in HR to be able to invoke PowerShell unless there is a reason, and then there's a question that should be asked. And then monitoring beyond alerts. Anomaly recognition is going to be, and not behavioral analytics, but anomaly recognition. And this is what I mean by like total telemetry, comprehensive analysis. This is where those tools need to play well together. Like Ricardo was saying, in 2025, if the systems that you're buying and procuring don't have APIs that play well together, you probably shouldn't buy them because there's no point in it. It's only hurting you in the long run. If they don't give you telemetry that's valuable, why are you using those systems too? You're never going to see this stuff a one-off unless it's just real bobo, like somebody running, the typical AV crap that they download off the internet on your system. You're not going to catch it with the easy things. If some of these systems that say that they stop breaches, we wouldn't have breaches. So it's about comprehensive analysis. It's about anomaly detection and being able to correlate that so that you can actually go back and find those problems. And you're going to see stuff from EDR evasion tools that are, they have to get the information that they're taking out somewhere. So that's when you'll catch a lot of that stuff, is you'll see an anomaly occur because somebody did something or some weird process showed up or a DLL did something that didn't make sense. And then you're looking through systems and the logs are doing their correlation stuff. And now we saw this weird bit of outbound traffic that's going to a place that it didn't start with before. So that's the anomaly detection piece, and then you can vector in on that and go fix that problem. Last thing I would say too is if you're buying these solutions and systems that don't allow you to actually fix the problem, what's the point? Like, how valuable would it be to go to the doctor and he takes your blood work and does all the cool tests and comes back and looks at the paper and goes, "Man, you're really sick," and then he leaves. You're like, "Oh, wait a minute, can I get a treatment plan, please?" "Oh, no, we don't do that here." All right. So you want to be able to fix the problem. Most systems nowadays with APIs, with these integrated capabilities, you should be able to, at the very least, isolate the issue. Again, I can figure out one machine being hacked. I can figure out a user's system being compromised. I can even figure out a cloud resource being a problem. But what I don't want is proliferation, living off the land, lateral movement, all those things. So it's not just theoretical, it's happening. It's going to continue happening even more. Start getting proactive with this stuff. Your customers should be aware of it. I think in truth, your customers should not necessarily be concerned about it. Because if you're doing this correctly, they'll never know that you actually fixed the problem. Like security's greatest problem for us as people that provide service is if we do our job right, nobody knows anything occurred. It's kind of like, no one knows about the 100,000 times the CIA saved us before 9/11, but they sure know about 9/11. If you're doing your job right, nobody knows that you've done anything. It's super awesome. It's like telling your wife you didn't do the dishes or something. You got to be ahead of this, start thinking about how it's going to happen. And the last piece really is to make sure that your current tooling is operationally capable of doing the things that we're talking about here. Not just identification, not just isolation, not just threat analysis and those things. It needs to be able to do all of that stuff and be able to enable an action on the other side of it. Otherwise, what is the point of doing those things? Policy engines are awesome. Policy engines nowadays, especially with the applied ML and whatever else, AI, if you want to call it that, policy engines can help you solve a lot of problems at scale. Personally, I think this is a great time to be an MSP and MSSP. I think this market is going to continue to grow, and you folks are all in the right area. But it's also a place where you can be left holding the bag if you're not doing stuff correctly and you're not staying ahead of it, because they're going to be looking for somebody to blame. You don't want it to be you.
Okay, good morning. My name is Javier Vargas. I'm Chief Product Officer at Lumu. Well, I've been leading the technical development of the product for a while now, since the very beginning. Okay, so for this lab, basically what I'm going to show you is a technique that is widely used to bypass EDRs nowadays. So what the elements of this lab are going to be like this Windows machine that you're seeing here is a normal Windows machine. It's a test Windows machine, of course. But if we go to the protection details, basically we see that everything is active except for one thing that I will show you right now. So if you see this, there are not current threats. The security intelligence is up to date. The only thing that we don't have on is the automatic sample submission. This is simply because we don't wanna leak our script here. We expect to be using this for more labs, and we have been using for a while now. So that's the only thing that we turn it off. Other than that, everything is working perfectly. It's a normal Windows machine with Windows Defender active and working, and everything is okay. So the other element of this lab is another machine. It's a server that we are going to use to get in control of the Windows machine. Basically, we are going to start a cover channel where we can control and launch anything in this machine. And what we are going to use? So today we are going to use DNSCAT. DNSCAT is a very common tool. It is used by both the good guys and bad guys. This is one of the most common living of the land tools that you can find in a lot of attacks out there. So this tool is so common that the server is written in Ruby, but you have clients for this tool like almost in every language. You have clients in C, in C, in Golang, in JavaScript, and also, of course, in PowerShell. And today we're going to use the PowerShell version. So let's try to run it with all the protections normal. So running it should be simple. It's just a matter of copying this command. This command download the PowerShell client and execute it and put it into memory and make it ready to be run. So if we paste it here, what you will see immediately is that the execution of this script was blocked. If we go to the protection history, you will notice that a threat was detected, and it describes exactly what we are doing, that we are trying to root something in PowerShell, and this is it's a dangerous program that could exploit the computer in which it runs. So it simply blocked it. You don't need to do anything else. Another interesting tool to review is the event viewer. In the event viewer, you can go to the Windows logs. To the application logs. In Windows, under the Windows Defender section, you will see, if everything is okay, you will see an event showing you that something wrong happened, and it's basically the same information that we just saw in the other window. Basically, it detected a PowerShell executing, and that Microsoft Windows Defender antivirus has taken some action. So this is important. This is very important. The AMSI mechanisms let the Windows Defender EDR qualify this script and block it. And additionally, an event was served through the ETW. The ETW is very important because a lot of protection tools and like EDRs itself and monitoring tools like XDRs depends a lot on this interface, on this Windows event interface. So we'll show you with our bypass how we can simply tamper with both mechanisms and simply bypass the EDR. So the next thing we are going to do is we're going to open a new PowerShell, of course. We are going to have two PowerShell, one that is protected by AMSI and the other one that we are going to tamper with the protection. So let me close all those windows to be more clear here. We have this script. This is the script that we are going to execute. I think this is already open here. It is a normal script. It's a plain PowerShell script, nothing special here. Of course, there are some techniques to patch the DLLs of AMSI, some obfuscation, but in general, it's a simple PowerShell script. So the first thing that we are going to do is execute this PowerShell script in the new PowerShell window. So we go to the desktop, and that is where we have this script located. And of course, we cannot execute this the same, but sometimes the execution of PowerShell is blocked. We simply enable it. And then we run our patching screen. It is ready to run the command. It simply imports everything, put it in memory, and we are ready to go. So the next thing that we have to do is to invoke the patching of the AMSI and the ETW. Once we run it, you can detail that the first thing that it did was to load Windows Form, which is a very popular tool of the .NET framework, and we use the Windows Form to get it to locate the AMSI DLL and patch the mechanisms that they use to communicate with the EDR. So next thing that you see here is that we are locating providers, the provider list. In this case, the only provider is Windows Defender, and here we are patching the list of provider and persisting the patch. And finally, we patch the ETW. So now this PowerShell screen is unprotected. So let's attempt to run the same command that we run here, which is download this script. Let me see. I can copy it. And we execute it here. And you notice that nothing happened this time. If you go to the ETW events, nothing has changed. If you go to the antivirus protection, there are no other messages other than the one that we already showed you. So we are ready to go. The next thing that we have to do is we go to our server and we start our cover channel, our server. So this is the server where DNSCAT is going to connect to, and from this server, I'm going to have total control of the machine. So if we execute DNSCAT, so now we are going to start DNSCAT, and if we go to the server, you notice that a connection was established. And once this happened, I can establish a reverse shell with the machine, and I'm in total control of the machine. Now I can execute the popular calculator. You see, launch the calculator in the machine. So basically, I can do anything. Let's, for example, go to the document section and see what's there. Maybe there is something interesting. I can go over the whole machine. I can list what is there. Here, and then I go to documents. And in documents, let's lead what is in that directory. There is only one file. Maybe we can see what is the content of that file. So in general, now we are in control of the machine. We are ready to do anything, and the EDR is not capable of detecting any of our actions. As long as we keep inside the PowerShell, we are good to go with any command, with any data filtration that we need to do. Okay, so this is all for the lab. Let's see how, even though EDRs get bypassed, network on, and this is how Lumu will detect this for you in the analytics section. If you go to tunneling, you see that we detected another tunneling section here. And basically, this is all the data. This is all the DNS requests that are being used to exfiltrate data and to create the cover channel. That's it.
So what did just we do? So it was, as I told you, simple but powerful. We executed, we used DNSCAT to create a cover channel. We executed a PowerShell script that tampers with AMC to create kind of a jailbroken shell environment. That's maybe not the best way to call it, but that's what happens. We created the cover channel to get in control of the machine, and we're ready to leverage plenty of living on the land techniques. Someone was asking me if this account, why the UAC didn't trigger, or the system didn't ask for admin privileges. It's because what we didn't need any, it wasn't doing any change to the system, so it didn't trigger any, like a elevation pop-up. So, but the reality is, once you get execution in the machine, it's a matter of staying low and wait for the right moment to escalate and to move laterally, to do whatever you need to do. And you have to be patient. So let's go a step back and try to understand at a very high level how the EDR works. So the general architecture of an EDR is like this. So there are a couple of components. The first, the first line of defense is the static scanner that is basically scanning the file system. This is the classic scan the machine. What they do is they go through all the files and check if they know those files as malicious. And also there is a mechanisms to detect when a new file was created, and usually what the EDR does is that the most basic way is they create a hash and they compare that hash with the knowledge base. Some scanners, if it is a binary, they do some like a more sophisticated hashing, but at the end is kind of a hashing. So the other mechanism is the early launch anti-malware driver. After Windows 8, I think, or Windows Vista, Microsoft created some mechanisms to create a legit driver. You can create a legit driver and subscribe to these events at kernel level. So before something is launched, you can analyze it and stop the execution. So this is an evolution, because traditionally what the EDR does is that they tamper with the kernel. They do a lot of hooking of DLLs and the drivers itself of the kernel, and that's why some things like what happened with CrowdStrike happened. Those blue screens of there everywhere. So it's because that practice it was the traditional practice of an EDR. So you had to hook all the operating system, all the kernel, in order to deploy some kind of protection. It's not good, because you are, whenever the system change a little bit, your hooks are no longer working. So it's like a delicate dance where you depend a lot on the exact version of the driver, the exact version of the kernel, the exact version of the operating system for your hooks to work properly. And what happens usually is that the protection mechanisms are tracking in what version I am. And if that's a different version, a version that I do not support, they usually turn off the protection. I can tell you that because I've been in that position, like building protection tools and tampering with the kernel, and that's what you do. So you don't wanna deploy your hooks in a newer version of the kernel, because otherwise you're gonna damage the system and create blue screens of death. That's very common. The other mechanism is AMSI. So as I told you, when Windows was built, it was built with extensibility in mind, with the ability to be flexible, to be extensible. But over the time, everybody realized that was not a good idea. It's like that kind of extensibility is what has made Windows more vulnerable, more susceptible to be attacked, it creates a lot of security problems. It is good for extensibility, for creating, for the user and developer experience, but for security it's a total bad idea. So they have started to create like a more standard interfaces, like the early launch anti-malware interfaces and the AMSI and ETW. So with AMSI, Microsoft created an interface that is a standard that you can use, that you don't have to tamper with the kernel in order to deploy your protection. And it is mostly intended for scripts. So that's what we use. For all the other like parts of how usually the EDR works, there are other techniques to bypass it. They are more complex, they are maybe more difficult, but an attacker can do it. You can go to the black market and buy the EDR evasion tools. If you have enough money, you will get the tool that you need for any EDR. So AMSI. What is AMSI? As I told you, AMSI stands for Anti-Malware Scan Interface. And it is intended mostly to protect scripting, the scripting engines that are built in Windows. And most of the antivirus and anti-malware industry using it because it's the standard way to do it. It protects PowerShell, Windows scripts, JavaScript, and Office Visual Basic macros. So anytime that you launch a Visual Basic macro or you launch a PowerShell or a JavaScript using Visual Basic script in Windows, it will load the AMSI, and the AMSI will make sure that before any script or any line, any command is executed, it sends it to any anti-malware that's subscribed to AMSI, and will let them after they, so it will execute if those subscribers allow the execution. So what isn't like a really interesting is that today, like about 80% of the attacks in 2024 were malwareless or fileless. What does it mean? That they didn't create a file in the file system. They were downloaded and put in memory and run from memory, so they didn't leave like the traditional footprint in the disk. So that's what they call malwareless. If you notice, when we executed DNSCAT, the DNSCAT client, that was what we were doing. We were downloading from a GitHub location and put it in memory, and everything was ready to execute. We didn't create a file for that. So why are they using scripting languages? Because it's easier to do the development. Today, with a lot of those AI tools, you can, if you are not very skilled at PowerShell, but you have some knowledge of other languages, you can simply translate whatever you want. And you don't need to learn the whole PowerShell syntax and language. It is portable, so every machine, every Windows machine has PowerShell, so you don't have to install. In the case of Python, for example, you don't have to install a Python interpreter before running a Python script. With PowerShell, it is ready to go. It helps you to bypass application allow listing. Usually the allow listing is based on the application that you are running. Here you are running PowerShell. So unless you simply block PowerShell, if PowerShell is allowed, maybe you can run any script. And something really powerful is that you can use the .NET framework inside PowerShell, which is where the danger is, because once you load the .NET framework, you are ready to execute whatever you execute in a C or C++ executable. Another fact, the second most used TTP in 2024 was command and scripted interpreter. That means PowerShell. So most of the attacks in 2024, they somehow leveraged PowerShell to perform their attacks. The first most used TTP was the exploitation of exposed infrastructure in the internet. So if you happen to have exposed servers and they are exploitable, that was the first. The second one was the use of PowerShell. So what is the architecture of AMSI, the AMSI thing? So remember, it is embedded in any PowerShell Visual script or other application that run this kind of interpreters. When it loads, the first thing that it does is it loads the library, the AMSI library. And these are the main functions. These were the functions that we were tampering with in our lab. So basically, AMSI scan buffer and AMSI scan string are the functions that are called whenever you are going to execute a PowerShell file, or whenever you are going to execute a PowerShell command or any command in the Visual Basic Script interpreter. So they trigger a scan in in the anti-malware provider. If the anti-malware or the antivirus return like a block it, they will block it, or if it allows, it will allow. That's how it works. It's a simple callback. You subscribe to the AMSI system, they will call you with whenever something is going to be executed, and you answer if it is okay or if it is not okay. That's simply how it works. So against this architecture, the most common bypass techniques are this. So the first one is PowerShell downgrade. So AMSI is available only for PowerShell version 3. So sometimes what the attacker do is that they downgrade to version 2, and AMSI is not going to be loaded. This is not very common because that downgrade is usually triggered by any protection. And also in a default Windows installation, it is not available because it requires a different version of the .NET framework. So you have to install it in order to be able to run PowerShell version 2. So it's simple, but it's not that common, not that effective. The other one is obfuscation. So you can create any kind of obfuscation. You can use B64 as we did, or you can XOR your code, or you can do any kind of obfuscation that hides the intentions of your code from the anti-malware scanner. Today, this is simple with the ChatGPTs and Geminis. What should happen here is that the anti-malware should know how to deobfuscate it and to detect it. If the anti-malware has like a more sophisticated way to analyze the script, it should detect it, but it doesn't happen very often. And the obfuscation is now better assisted with the AI models. In our case, as I told you, this lab was built from concepts from different researchers. We put it together, and we used Gemini a lot to put things together and to obfuscate the script. It's simple. As I told you, of course, you need to understand coding, and you need to understand what's going on, but those tools help you to be faster. The other techniques is patching AMSI. So in our script, we obfuscated the script, and then we patch AMSI. It's very effective. You simply make sure that the calls that AMSI does, you control them. It can defeat signature-based detection. And it is only something that is important, and it's only applicable to the PowerShell process that is running. You notice there was one PowerShell where the anti-malware was detecting everything, and the other one is not. So it requires like a specific environment, but that's something that the attacker will do. There is something called like a patchless AMSI, but at the end it's also patching. So in this way, in this technique, what you will do is you are not going to patch the functions provided by the AMSI DLL, but you are going to patch the calls. So you go through the interpreter code in RAM, and you locate where it calls those functions, and you simply put a detour in that like an entry point. Basically, what you do is you avoid PowerShell or the Visual Basic Script Interpreter. You avoid them actually calling AMSI. So you don't patch AMSI, but you patch the running environment where the script is running. That's more difficult. It's like not more difficult. It's less portable, because maybe you land into a different version of PowerShell. A slight change in the version of PowerShell will make like the import table and the location of the functions are different. So locating where the functions are actually called is more difficult. So it's not that common, but it's also powerful and can be a stealthier, because like a patching AMSI is like an immediate red flag. Trying to modify your own RAM is not that is not immediately a red flag, but it's more difficult. So that's why not that common. But I'm sure that if you have a persistent attack, you have something with the determination to attack your organization, they will do it if that's better for them. The initial vector. So how they get the user to execute it. This is an example from Luma Stealer. Luma Stealer simply send you an email, and that email contains an URL where you go and they pretend to be Cloudflare validating that you are a human, and at the end they show this pop-up where they tell you like press Windows R and Control V, and because we need to validate that you are a human, and the user do it. So the reality is that the weakest link is still the user. So just again, is it clear? Like I send you an email. That email contains a link to a site that pretends to be verifying that you are a human. You click the traditional Cloudflare verify you are a human. Once you click it, it will tell you press Windows R, like Windows R and Control V, and that's all. Using JavaScript, they put the command into your clipboard, so you are ready to paste it. You paste it and run, and they verify that they are a human. But well, it's not only that a verification that you are human, it's the execution, the actual execution of the street. This is real. This is from Luma Stealer. This is the vector that they use to run. In this case, they were using the HTML interpreter that is embedded in Windows, and it can run JavaScript. So it's pretty much similar to this one. So ransomware guns are using PowerShell, Visual Script, and JavaScript. Which of them? All of them. Virtually all of them are using PowerShell. The only one is maybe 3 bugged, but all the other ones are using PowerShell. So this is very, very common. So how you defend of this? So what we believe is that you have to pick like a defense strategy. Cybersecurity is more than about tools. It's about discipline. It's about doing the right things. It's boring, but doing the right things is usually what gets you to be effective. So you can choose to use defense in depth or zero trust. Use something. Be sure that you have a strategy. We like zero trust not only because Chase is with us, but because in terms of the network, when you deploy with a zero trust strategy, the network is less chaotic. So when you deploy zero trust, usually everything has only the privileges that are necessary. And when you observe the network, it tends to be easier to understand what a normal behavior is. It's easier to trigger an alert when something weird is happening. But it's okay if you want to use defense in depth or zero trust. The right thing is to choose something and do it with discipline, and then assume that you are compromised and prove otherwise. Be sure that you deploy your defense with discipline. You have a good plan to deploy your defense. We are not telling you not to use an EDR. The EDR is really good. Is your first defense. Same with firewalls. Same with email protection. So deploy them. Make sure that you do it well, but also be sure that you are proving their effectiveness. So be sure that they are working. And we at Lumu believe that the best way to check that your defense are working properly is looking at your network, watching what's happening at your network. The EDR can get bypassed, but at the end, the attacker has to use the network to establish command and control. You have to use the network to move laterally, to do everything. So the network is something that everybody has to use today. So in the network lies the truth about the how compromised is your network.
Yeah, and good morning, everybody. Somehow it's not the afternoon yet. Yeah, we're almost there. I just want to say, first and foremost, thanks for giving us a chance to show what we built here. I know we're a little bit early here, and we're kind of like the kids that are sitting at the front of class, which is a good place to be. So I appreciate you guys giving us a chance to show you here what it is that we built. I have a couple slides that I want to go through that covers the product, that covers, what the user experience, what the MSP experience is like, and some of the ideas behind why we built it and what you can do as a service with this product, both to set yourself apart from other MSPs and also to serve your clients better. So a little bit then about me. So I come from a short background of compliance. I'm actually a UCF grad originally, whether that's good or bad. I spent about 6 years worth of time at ConnectWise and been with Lumu for about 2 years. I'm as far back as matters a Florida boy originally. I now live in Boulder, Colorado, and I'm a motorcyclist, a hiker, and I am a snowboarder, and I have both the hair and the cast now to prove it. So I'm officially a Colorado resident now. But let's talk about a couple things, because a lot of things have been said today as far as EDR evasion and this specific point. I want to back out a little bit from that to explain that the EDR evasion is something that's a part of a much larger thing, which is the overall hackable surface of these companies that you're managing. And so pretty much everybody has something in place for perimeter defenses. You'll have a firewall of some kind, whether that's a cheap or a high end. At the same time, pretty much nobody's running decryption at the edge due to latency. And so your firewall has admin control of every connection, but it doesn't care too much about what's happening in those connections. Your EDR, we talked about extensively. Your EDR is fantastic, but it can't see anything that's happening on an IoT device, right? You bring a new Android phone into an environment, no EDR on the planet is going to help you with that until it hits an EDR populated endpoint and actually deploys to that. And so the same is true with email security, right? If we're using a hacked email account, so much of that detection and filtering, unless we're just sending a knowingly bad file, bypasses most email security because it's coming from the CEO or some other kind of compromised account. And so there's a larger point that I don't think we got a chance to make earlier about EDR evasion, because when we talk about EDR evasion, a lot of times we get a lot of phones come up and take pictures because it's a newer topic for most MSPs. At the same time, I think it's something that is a bit ironic because we don't know if it's happened, right? We know if EDR misses the detection. We know if EDR allows ransomware to deploy something. But do we know if it was bypassed or if it just missed the detection? And that's something that I think speaks to the fact that these attacks are out there, right? People are getting breached every day. Hack revenue is up 33% year over year from 23 to 24. And so the way in is known, but what we don't have is the evidence that this is actually happening. We see the evidence of the damage, but we don't have, specific logs to say exactly how something's actually happened. So it's something that I think we can spend a bit of time on, but it's a point that I want to make just because it's a bit like, getting mugged by a ghost or something, right? It's like if he disappears, how can you tell the police who did it, right? So it's something that when we look at what we provide as a service in the product, the first thing that we do is collect metadata, right? So this entire lake of data that's above the endpoints that you manage and between the outside internet and those endpoints is something that we can gather and make sense of. And so what we do when we can gather that data is we copy it in real time. And so we're not like traditional firewall solutions where we're intercepting traffic and creating latency. We're cloning traffic, and we're cloning traffic to Lumu's cloud. And so we copy this metadata. And if you think about how little data, and this is the part I get a kick out of saying this because this was the part that for me was tough to believe, but we have a proprietary detection engine. We actually have two, but we have a piece of Lumu that's entirely patented, that's unique to what we do. And I don't mean to overstate this, but if you think about how little data is available on a network traffic header that's encrypted, you have sender, recipient, IP protocol, maybe a couple other fields worth of data, but you have very little data to actually operate on. And it's true that we really can't do much with a single encrypted packet, but with those flows, now we can see behavior. Now we can see what is something trying to do from an intent perspective on your network. How does it behave? Does it behave like something that's masking itself? Does it behave like something that's an obvious known bad actor? There's a whole range of attacks between here and there that based on behavior, we can see what they are and what they behave like. And so if we can determine something's malicious, and actually, let me back up for one more step. We have two different detection algos, right? So the first is behavioral, where we're looking at packet flows and we're seeing, are these novel packet flows? How do they behave? Do they match existing malware patterns? The second is that we have about 95 threat feeds that go into the product. Now, I'll quantify that a little bit because at ConnectWise, we had a great relationship with SentinelOne. SentinelOne uses a high number of threat feeds for an EDR. They use about 35 at the last that I saw about 2 years ago. So 95 is a really, really high number of threat feeds. We actually just closed an acquisition of a European malware threat feed aggregator, Maltiverse. And so we're looking to roll that into the product throughout the year. But it's something that we want to have the widest, quickest idea of who's out there doing bad stuff that we can. And so when we have those two algorithms that are running, when we can determine something's malicious, we'll then initiate a response for you. And so this is not like a SIM where you have to manage it yourself and you have to have a guy with a big head that makes sense of all these network signals. This is something that runs for you, right? This is something that can take this data, this ridiculous amount of data, and process it and make sense of it. And when we can catch something, whether that's based on a bad location or a bad file or a bad behavior, we can then push that out to the tools that can take that block. And so if your firewall has complete admin control over the network, let's cut that off completely from the outside network. If your EDR is able to start remediating, let's give it the hash to remediate that infection, right? If you have an MDR that's behind your EDR, if you have a Huntress or something else, that's something that we can then trigger to start that resolution. And so what we can do is we can take this from a single network signal, we can determine what malware family it is, and then have your services teams, whether internal SOC or external SOC, actually remediate that specific type of malware. So it's not something that, it's easy to think that, hey, we're just blocking DNS connections. In reality, we're doing quite a bit more than that because it's not just about defanging, it's about starting that process of removing. Now, at the same time, there's one more quick aside that I want to do, which is that right now we're at a state where if you look at the MITRE attack kill chain, right, EDR kicks in at stage 3 or 4, right? We're waiting till something deploys and runs on a machine in order to tell if something's actually bad. That's 3-4 steps too late, right? So what does it mean for your workload as an MSP if on that horrible Saturday night that something actually happens, now you're rolling back 1 or 2 computers or no computers because we've actually blocked a deployment rather than actually going and saying, hey, we caught EDR or EDR caught it. Now let's do 50 endpoints worth of new Windows 11 licenses. Right. So it's something that we can minimize the damage, but we can entirely prevent the attack in the first place rather than just cleaning it up. The other part, and this is probably something Chase thinks about a little bit more than I do, but if something's able to deploy to endpoints in your environment, something else has probably happened within that environment. Do we have the network signals to know what that is? So what we actually do is we grab DNS, we grab NetFlows, we also grab syslog, any kind of firewall data. This also includes things like SASE or DNS filter. So anything that's handling that part of the network, we can typically integrate into, and also email data. And so all emails will actually get 2 scans. The first scan is at rest. When it hits your inbox, we'll scan it and say, hey, what do we know about this email? Where's it sending you? But then if someone clicks a link, now it actually becomes a live connection and we can do behavioral analysis on it. And so when we can determine something's bad, we'll take out these domains or IPs. Now, an interesting thing about the IP, in some cases, we're blocking over a specific port or a specific subdomain. So we don't block gmail.com. We'll block a very specific sub-URL of that. And if we can determine a hash, we'll push that out to your EDR to automatically trigger that resolution. We also have bidirectional ticket sync with most PSAs. So as long as you're not the only one using it, we probably have the integration. If not, we also have email syncs as well. But most importantly, and this is something that I have here on this slide, we respond for you, right? So this is not something where you need a human in the loop. You don't need a network security guy in order to run this. This is something that can take your L0, L1 technicians and give them data that they can operate on and kick up to a higher rep and say, hey, listen, there is something here. We've blocked it, but this is something we want to look into. Now, going forward a little bit, what we also want to do is unify your security posture, right? Right now, if your firewall says, hey, this is a suspicious site, is this a trusted certificate, or your browser says that, does anything say that to your EDR, right? These are all valuable pieces of data that other pieces of software could do something with, but they're not able to get it. And so back to RV's point here about integration, what we want to do is share this data as much as possible. So if we can make detections, if we can make any kind of analysis, we'll push that to everybody that can take that. And if that's your firewall, if that's your EDR, if that's a DNS filter or something else, we'll push out to anything and everything that can do it. We can also accommodate multiple stacks on the same site. So if we have multiple firewalls, EDRs, things like that, that's all stuff that we can work with. But here's an interesting point. And so going back, and I apologize here for doing the next snap, but this data that we're collecting, right? This is stuff that we're operating on in real time. But what we also do is we take it and we store it in the cloud for you in AWS. And so it's AWS local. We also have Canadian locations for Canadian clients. But most importantly, this is data that you now have as a 2-year archive for your clients. So first and foremost, if you guys are saying, hey, we already have a SIM, we already do that, great, send us the logs, right? If you're paying for SIM storage and we can take those logs, send us the logs and offload that storage cost from the SIM. We don't care how many clients, how much browsing, how much data, anything else. We'll grab every single network log that we can and store it for you. And so that goes back 2 years. Now, what we also did, and this is something that we launched in, I believe, March of this year, is we now go back every day at 9 a.m. and we do a full scan against all 95 threat feeds against every single piece of data that we've stored going back 2 years. And so in the event of, the really nasty ones, the 0 days, the things that nobody knows is malicious, those are still going to show up in your network archive, even if we don't know what they are. And so when the world then finds out, hey, this location is bad, or this actor is bad, or this new type of threat behaves this way, we can go back through those logs every day and make that association. If you look in we have a test portal that's technically partially live, partially a test portal, but 1 out of every 5 or 6 detections that we do over a long time will come from playback, because there's simply so much happening that's quicker than the security companies can actually react to. And so even though we're getting most of the threat feeds, it's something that we still need to rely on somebody in some cases knowing something. Now, we can determine things behaviorally, but once they let us know, then we can issue that block retroactively. And if it turns out we're part of a new botnet, or we're part of a botnet that's similar to another botnet, we can then issue that block in real time the second we make that determination. And so this is continuous threat hunting in your log archive in real time. It's absolutely my favorite slide background here. So what could we do here to turn this into revenue? So when we rolled out to the MSP, we asked a couple different questions, and the things that we got back are the MSP's chief concerns. There's a few tertiary questions here as far as how do we know things work and things like that. But when it comes to the business conversation, the biggest questions are, which of my customers are the most risk to me? How do I get more clients? How do I get more profitable clients or higher end clients? My tech stack is rising every year. We're getting more tools every year. And also, how do I find technicians that can actively work these alerts and do so efficiently? And so we can help with 3.5 of these. And so what we can do, and we rolled this out, this is a tool that's actually in early access. I want to mention this, if anybody here wants to get early access on a new feature that we're launching in about 2 weeks, just let us know after the show and we'll get you guys registered in the beta group. But we created something called Lumu Discover. Lumu Discover is a tool that is both a risk assessment and a sales tool. Now, I don't want to take too much wind out of the sales of Discover, because we're going to do a direct launch with that in about 2 weeks. But it's a tool that we built in that lets you see who around you, what clients that you've talked to and not talked to have what level of compromise. Who do we want to target? Which companies have had breaches? When have those breaches happened, right? What data can you now have in your back pocket? Because we're looking and pulling this off the dark web, that when you go into that client conversation or even that prospecting call, you have a data point to reference, right? So what we do with Discover is that we can help do an understanding of what's the risk level of your clients, both systems-wise, website-wise, and user-wise. And so what we can do is determine what the risk level is of your client base, and then the ones that have the highest risk level are the ones that we can deploy Lumu to first. After that, we can roll Lumu out as a service to additional clients, right? This covers gaps that are left by current solutions. Now, is it something that, let's say, your absolute, that client that piecemeals everything, is he going to be the first one that jumps at it? No, but there's still a way to sell it to him because it's a relatively cost-effective solution. And I'll go through pricing as well. But it's a solution that does extremely wide coverage, right? So if you are looking for a minimal viable stack for those clients that piecemeal, us and Defender covers just about every device type in the environment, plus network traffic, plus email, plus several other things. So if you guys have questions, come by the booth. We'll talk about that a little bit more in detail. But this is something that you can roll out to your existing clients, right? As a value add, as a service, as logging, as archiving. And so if we then go to the step 3, growing your client base, what we can do with Discover is you can pull domains from existing companies, right? If your goal is, let's say next year, we're going to prospect dental offices. Great. Let's pull the nearest 50 dental offices domains and let's see what their breach history is. And if it turns out that 5 of them have had breaches this year, that's who we target first. And maybe you don't knock up on the door and say, hey, Mr. Customer, I have your password, but it's something that allows you to go into an informed conversation that A, they need your services, and B, that there's a value to your services because you have the evidence that they need it. And so regardless of how you're actually selling this, this can empower several different parts of your business, right? The obvious use case is for IR, right? You put us in an environment, we can see what's happened. We can do something that very few other tools can do, which is retroactive lookup, right? So if you have a client who has a compromise, hook us into their SIM. We're going to pull that data 2 years back into our archive, and exactly the functionality I mentioned earlier, we're going to be able to do that day 0. So you get a net new client that has network logs. You give us the network logs, we can see what's been happening in the last 2 years in that environment. If you have an IR solution or situation where somebody says, hey, we don't know what's happened. We fired our current MSP. We think we're clean, but what's going on? Bring us in, deploy us. We're going to see what's happening in the network. We're going to see if there's any aberrant traffic, if there's any unusual traffic, right? And so depending on what we're doing, if that's pen testing, if that's just standard managed security, or if you want to move to a MITRE framework model where you're targeting, let's say, slightly higher level corporate clients with a very common framework, we can help build your responses around the MITRE framework because we push everything to the MITRE framework. And so if you are looking at Lumu as a service add, whether we're enhancing your IR, we're helping with pen testing, we're helping with customer onboarding risk, that's something that you can do day 1. At the same time, if you have clients that just want to consume software and answer the alerts themselves, this is a fantastic tool for that because you're not actually having to answer those alerts technically. Right? If we catch something, again, we block it. So if you give this to a client that's answering the alerts themselves, the only alerts that they're going to get are things that have already been answered by us. And so if this is a hands-off resell, good luck customer type of a relationship, this is the perfect tool for that because you can put it in their hands and they don't need technical experience for this to actually work. It's also a very resilient tool in that sense. At the same time, if you do have an MDR service, we can help get more out of those $6-7 you're already paying per endpoint. If you have an MDR service, that's our SOC. Right? If we create an alert and we catch a block and we push out something to your EDR, if your EDR is talking to Huntress, Huntress is going to see that alert as well. So if you guys are already paying for that service, that's something that we hook into their API and we push more alerts their way. So it should be a net value add in that sense. And so talking about a few different benefits here, we talk a lot about being able to catch something or not being able to catch something. The other question, the other side of that question is how fast can we catch something, right? Are we looking at catching something in milliseconds or are we looking at something in minutes? Most SOCs will have an SLA that's 5 to 15 minutes on average, right? At the speed of code, that's a very long time. And if we're looking at something that's hitting multiple devices and calling down on multiple endpoints, it's something that, we do need to be able to react relatively quickly. And so we can help you guys stand out. We can help you then stand yourselves apart from other MSPs because it's something that you can explain to a non-technical customer that you're doing and they're not doing, right? It's something that, if you think at the high level, right, we believe 2 main principles. One, every single piece of malware that an MSP is concerned with has started as a network connection at some point. So every single piece of malicious software started off initially as a network signal. And the second is because the network can't get bypassed, every one of those signals is in there, whether we know they are or not. And so what we can do is we can help you guys show a better control over your client's environment, right? Ownership of this environment. If you guys, and I'll get to this point a little bit further, but if we're talking about a client where you're managing desktops and servers, and you say everything else is out of the MSP's purview, it's a very common contract, right? But if something were to happen through an IoT device that they didn't tell you about, they would still ask you and say, "Hey, Mr. MSP, why were we not prevented from this? Why were we not protected from ourselves in that sense?" And so we can help, just provide better coverage, better ownership of the environment, and just a more mature security posture with a faster response. Now, there's two clients here that I pulled quotes from, and one of them, Angel from DataCore here on the left, I believe he's actually at the event. He's an absolute Lumu evangelist. He's been using us for about 4 years. He actually reached out to us back when it was a single tenant product. So he saw the functionality of what we were doing and said, "Hey, I'm going to find a way to make this work." I asked him, informally between you and me, you're sitting at a bar at IT Nation, you tell another MSP about Lumu. What do you tell them that Lumu does for you? And he gave me this answer, and he said, "But essentially it's peace of mind. It helps me sleep at night. It's something that I can put into the stack and I can say, hey, there are entire areas that weren't covered that are now covered. And we have a second layer of coverage on all those other areas." Now, Verdant is a very interesting MSP because we started working with them about 3 months ago. Verdant actually had eyes on us going back 2 years. And once we released the log archive functionality, we got a call with them and they said, "Hey, let's move forward. This is the thing we were waiting for." With Verdant, it's an interesting situation because they initially bought a couple hundred endpoints. In the last 3 months, they've doubled that twice. And so they've had a very good customer reception to this. But it's also a company that they're very far ahead of the ball in how they think about security. They're very setup focused. I would say a little bit more than the average bear, but it's something where they knew the value of the software and they waited for us to get it right. So once we had that feature ready, they reached out to us and said, "Hey, let's roll this out." So customer reactions have been positive. There is also one customer quote that I wish I could put up on here, but it's just a thing that I personally enjoy, which is that one client, I asked him, I said, "How would you describe Lumu?" And he said, "It's like deploying the Eye of Sauron." So it's something that, can work in the environment, can see everything, and is actively looking 24/7. But it's also something that, based on this and quite a few other MSPs, customers understand it, right? Everybody is aware of the network. Everyone's aware of how many millions of records are being created by the average office environment every day.